And the reason why we're recording it is because we will make the slides available that we're going to use tonight to everyone afterwards, and we'd also obviously share the recording in case you want to share it onwards in your community. We will be taking questions, and we're going to have 2 presentations, but please during them use the chat box. If you've got anything that occurs to you, comes to mind, anything you want to sort of share with others, any questions you have, and then we will pick them up after the presentations. So the first presentation we'll have, then we'll have the questions for that one, then we'll have another presentation and a sort of questions and the wrap-up questions at the end. Please, if you do, when we get to the question section, need to ask a question, if you put your hand up, I think it's under the reactions, there's a, if you look down the bottom of your screen, it says reactions, it says raise hand. If you use that raise hand symbol, then that'll cue you, and it makes it easier for me in this position to make sure that we're getting to everyone with their questions. That's just the housekeeping part of it. Hopefully you've all come this evening to some presentations and questions on conserving nature and boosting biodiversity in green spaces in your community. This is part of a series of online talks we give called Staying Connected, and really the idea of them is to share what's going on through Cambridgeshire ACRE's work, but that of communities across Cambridgeshire, so that we can sort of all learn from each other, and that you can take away ideas from what's going on elsewhere. Contact us if you want more information about those ideas. So it's really a sharing event. Tonight, as I said, we're going to have 2 presentations on a project we've been running that's funded by the National Heritage Lottery Fund, and that is working with communities, landowners and parish councils to develop green space, and you'll see that as we have the presentations. The first presentation is going to be given by Howard Jones, who's the project manager, and then we're going to hear from Elizabeth Bolt, who is the Natural Heritage and Communities Officer. So I'm going to hand over first of all to Howard, and if you'd like to share your presentation. Howard, I can't see. Oh, you're there with, yeah, in the middle of my screen. If you'd like to share your presentation,
I will do just a second.
First.
I'll just do share screen. Give me a second or so.
Yeah, share your screen.
Is that working, everyone?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Excellent. Technology working. Very unusual. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Kirsten, for introducing us. As Kirsten said, I'm Howard Jones, and I have been for the last 3.5 years or so. Well, not actually 3 years, actually. Project manager for a really exciting project in Cambridgeshire, which Cambridgeshire ACRE delivered, called New Life on the Old West. Basically, just talk very briefly about New Life in the Old West. I'm pretty sure some of you know quite a lot about the project already. We have been working in a location between Wicken Fen to the east and the new, well, relatively new RSPB site at Ouse Fen near Willingham to the west. You can see those 2 sites on this map. That's the slightly khaki-looking green. And we've been working in that darker green area, which is all the parishes in between those 2 fantastic and internationally important nature reserves. The work I've been doing, amongst other things, is putting in new habitat enhancements on both farmed land and community green spaces, mainly green spaces owned by the parish councils. And this map here shows a pretty good representation of what we've done over the last few years. Each of those dots, red dots, show an habitat enhancement on a farm, or actually a big group of habitat enhancements on one farm, and also the green dots, habitat enhancements, which is a really hard thing to say, habitat enhancements on parish council land. And the dots are spread out quite nicely. And the idea is to try to put in stepping stones between those 2 nature reserves to allow wildlife to move more freely between the reserves, and just as importantly, get out into the countryside a bit more and more visible for local communities. I'll talk very quickly about what we've done on farms. Altogether, we've done about 90+ habitat improvements on both the farms and the green spaces. Obviously, farms tend to have more space than parish councils, so there some of the work has been larger scale, such as this sizable field corner pond in a farm near Little Thetford, a Bedwell Hay farm. And also moving over to Willingham, a big lagoon off the river itself, and also a 900-metre length of berm, or a strip of shallow water in a farm drain, which have both gone into Queenholm Farm, north of Willingham. These obviously pictures taken just after their construction, and pretty bleak and muddy they look, but then within a year, it's quite incredible how they green up. And these are pictures I took at Willow Grange Farm of 2 corner ponds on the right-hand side, and another one of those lengths of berm. That's the main picture on the left-hand side. And they were taken late spring, early summer, immediately after the winter in which the work was done. I thought it was a great opportunity to show how quickly nature will come along and start taking advantage of some of the work you do if you're creating habitat. So moving on to community green spaces, what I'd like to talk about most is some of the work we've been doing on community green spaces, and also how our experiences can help yourselves or any groups in the area who are thinking about doing work to green their community, to increase the amount of wildlife habitat and with luck increase biodiversity. So there's 2 things I'd like to talk about in particular, 2 types of habitat enhancement. One, creating wildflower rich areas, be that wildflower meadows, or planting bulbs, or putting in plug plants into green spaces to increase the amount of plants such as white clover and cinquefoil. All sorts of ways you can bring more flowers into your community. And the other one is actually I'll talk about hand digging mainly very small ponds on green spaces, which as you know, in a county like Cambridgeshire, which is very, very heavily drained, bringing in more fresh water is one of the most important things you can do for our wildlife. Before you start though, if you've got a village in mind and you want to start looking to see how you can improve the biodiversity of your village or community, it's quite important to find out what's there already. There's a very, very useful tool which Natural Cambridgeshire has put together called the Local Nature Recovery Toolkit, which is happily available online. I'll share the link on a slide towards the end of my talk. And this gives some fantastic advice on how you can make a simple map of the wildlife habitats you have in your village, identifying what they are, identifying why they're important for nature. It helps you decide which habitats do you want to improve or create, what species do you think you can particularly increase in your area, and it helps you, very importantly, develop a plan for habitat creation or improvements, a plan such as where you might be linking up existing habitats, improving those that exist, or introducing new ones. One of the things it gets across very clearly is that luckily, when it comes to habitat enhancement, slowly is best. There's no need to go at it like a bull in a china shop and try and get everything done in 6 months or something. You can do bite-sized pieces of work over 5 to 10 years, and you'll make a massive improvement for wildlife if you work over that time. The Natural Cambridgeshire's toolkit also helps you develop a plan for maintaining and monitoring any habitats you create, and also a plan for monitoring what's wildlife is there, which can be really good fun. So that's a really good starting point, this Nature Recovery Toolkit, and I recommend it very highly to anybody who's thinking about greening their community. So creating a wildflower area quickly, there's various ways you can do this. People often think, well, I do, people often think of hay meadows, of wonderful wildflower meadows in farms or on community green spaces where you have a large area of basically wildflowers which are developed and managed over time. That's not the only way you can do it, but if you do have a large area which you can give over, perhaps an area on the side of a football pitch, or a part of a village green, or an area underneath a community orchard. Meadows work very well in community orchards. There's some simple ways you can go about doing this. I mean, obviously, this is very much a potted version of what to do, but some ideas how to get you going. I'll also point you towards some fantastic resources on the net, which will help out as well. So if you're creating a wildflower area, the first thing to do is decide what wildflowers you want to plant. One way you can do that is to undertake expensive soil analysis and see what will suit your soils most. That's quite expensive and time consuming. So another way you could go about it is buy a general multi-purpose wildflower meadow mix. And that's what I recommend. It has a huge range of different species, and you can be pretty certain that something some of the species in that mix will suit your site and get going. So mark out your site, obviously, in discussion with the local community, some of which this isn't going to cause any problems. And then in the autumn time, before the frosts start, cut the grass very short indeed, and then rake up the grass, whether by hand or by mowers, and take the grass away and put it on a compost heap or pile it up in the corner of the village green, whatever you're going to do with it. And then do something called scarifying the area, which basically means trying to create areas of bare soil. You get quite clayey soils in some parts of Cambridgeshire. And where you have clay soil, it's pretty much important not to create more than, say, 20% bare patches, because when it rains, it can form a pattern on top of the clay, and then the seeds would find it very hard time to get established. Other parts of the country, other parts of the county, actually, you can do a more scarification where you don't have heavily clay soils. Once you've cut and raked and scarified, here's the fun bit: broadcast the seed for the meadow, like if sowing a field of oats or something. Get a line of volunteers out to walk up and scatter the seeds around pretty thinly, actually, onto the pre-existing cut and scarified area. There's also a really clever way to get this going nice and quickly. The picture at the top on the right-hand side there is a fantastic plant called yellow rattle. It has two nicknames. One is fireweed, because farmers used to say that it would cause fires in hay barns and hay ricks. And a slightly more pleasant nickname is the meadow maker, because that's what it does. Yellow rattle is hemiparasitic in that, as well as having green leaves and creating its own nutrients through photosynthesis, it also attaches itself to the roots of pre-existing grasses, and it takes water and nutrients from the grasses to help itself grow. By doing this, it obviously weakens the grass growth. Grasses tend to grow more quickly than wildflowers. So if you can weaken the grass growth, it creates more space for the wildflowers. So scattering a good amount of yellow rattle should help you get your meadow established nice and quickly. It's really important to get this done before the winter frosts, because yellow rattle and quite a few other species of wildflowers actually need a long period of winter cold to germinate properly. So here's some pictures of us working on a wildflower meadow with a gang of volunteers in Rampton. This is a lovely big site alongside an orchard and the football pitch. They have a wonderful big recreation ground in Rampton, so we're able to give over a good amount of space. So there, a meadow is essential. But there's other things you can do as well. So the bottom right-hand picture there are of little plug plants. These are white clover and cinquefoil. And these are plants which can thrive quite happily in more heavily managed green spaces, which are regularly mown for dog walking or something during the winter. And you can grow these plug plants on, as we've done there, in little compost pots, stick them in the ground. And whilst they won't look like a fantastic Yorkshire hay meadow or something, they will increase the amount of pollen and nectar sources for really important pollinating insects in the area. And that's something which you can't overemphasize how important that is at the moment. So that's another option for bringing more flowers into your community. We're also doing some work in this respect at Haddenham, at a closed cemetery in Haddenham. That might be a nice area to look at bringing in more wildflowers, local cemeteries. Obviously, you've got to bear in mind how they're used by people and make sure the graves are well tended, etc. But quite often they're wildlife-rich areas anyway. And if you have areas of long grass, they can be a good place to start to look to bring in some more wildflowers. The big picture on the right-hand side, we're trying to create a bit of a wildflower area along a verge of one of the roads by the village green in Over. That's another good place to look at. Roadside verges. Obviously, they're not being used very much, and there's somewhere where you've got space to put in some more flowers without necessarily taking green space away from the community. And then finally, some daffodils on the left-hand side. You don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of trying to create a wildflower area. Those daffodils are providing pollen and nectar to insects just as much as the wildflower flower area does, and that's really important at the moment. It doesn't have to be daffodils; it can be a whole range of different bulbs which flower at different times of the spring and summer, and that way you're providing a fantastic resource for pollinating insects. So once you've created your wildflower area, look at some of the fantastic stuff you can come up with. These are some of the species we found in the wildflower area in Rampton. You've got cowslip right hand bottom. I've now forgotten what the one at the top right hand, Self-heal, the purple and blue one, a whole load of creeping buttercups, which farmers might turn their noses up about somewhat because they spread vegetatively, but they look lovely when you get a lot of them together. And in the top left-hand picture, you've got that wonderful pink ragged robin and also some meadow buttercup. And you can see some of the grasses there. There's still a lot of grasses which you'd expect in a meadow, but if you can see that they're not enormous, they're not aggressive, they're not thugs, they're not overwhelming the wildflowers, and that's because we sowed a lot of yellow rattle there as well. It's already suppressing the grass growth. We also got things such as sorrel in that top left-hand picture, and obviously there's ribwort plantain and all sorts of things like that as well. So it's a very promising site, that one. It's very beautiful in the spring and summer. So the other thing to bear in mind when you're putting in wildflowers, you're not only providing a resource for wildlife, you're providing a resource for people. They're fantastic places to visit. They're really good places for children or families or older people to see and learn about different flowers, to see and learn about different types of bees and bumblebees and butterflies and hoverflies. You can put together a group to monitor it regularly every 3 months, say. You can do fixed point photography to see how it develops over several years. And it can become a really nice focal point for people who are keen on getting outside more, learning more about the natural world, to get really stuck in your local community. And then maintenance, obviously, there's a bit of ongoing maintenance with wildflower areas. If you've created a meadow, it's quite straightforward. First of all, enjoy the flowers and keep a diary of what flowers have appeared and when. And then the most important thing to do is that you should shut up, that's what it's called, the meadow between the end of March and into late summer, either from mid to late July or into August, depending upon how your flowers have grown and when they've set seed. That's probably the most important thing. Do not mow the wildflower areas in spring or summer. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So the first summer cut should take place late July into August, when everything is set seed. You can use scythes if you've got enough fit and healthy people to help you, or obviously a bar mower or Allen scythe or something. And then once you've got it to a suitable length, then an ordinary mower then can do some more cutting if you decide to do so, and remove all the cuttings. That's the important thing, is to take off all the grass, all the flowers, because by doing that, you're reducing the soil fertility, and wildflowers grow better in low fertility soil. If you've got high fertility soil, they get massively outcompeted by the grasses. After you've done your late summer cut, you can mow as much as you need then between the August and spring to keep the patch accessible to people, and then shut up the meadow once again at the end of March to allow everything to follow its natural cycle again. You may wonder, why have I got a picture of a common frog, a hedgehog, and a grass snake in this slide? It's because all those species are quite likely to be using your wildflower meadow at the end of summer, because they love damp, grassy areas to hide and forage and to live. So before you go out there with your mowers, it's a very good idea to go around with some sticks and have a good old prod about in the grass, so you can scare anything off, so you don't chop up any lovely frogs or hedgehogs. So that's quite an important thing to bear in mind as well. So there we are. That's wildflowers done as quickly as possible. And there is a lot more you can learn about that online. There's some fantastic links I'll share with you at the end of this talk. Moving on to small village ponds. Cambridgeshire is incredibly heavily drained, and it's a very dry county, as we all know. The UK as a whole has lost, I do not want to even hazard a guess what percentage of its ponds over the last, 60 years or so. So adding a small pond to your village or your community is one of the best things you can do for wildlife. If you put a pond in, wildlife will start appearing half an hour after the water appears. You'll get pond skaters, you'll get the first aquatic beetles flying in. Even if the pond is hand dug by people, you are creating a wonderful natural environment which will benefit any number of different species of invertebrates, plants, reptiles, mammals, you name it, birds. They all need access to water. It's also quite straightforward to do. These pictures here show a pond which we dug as part of the project on a piece of land in Little Thetford. As you can see, there were 5 of us working there. It took us about 2 hours, and I'm exaggerating, 2 or 3 hours most likely. We dug a shallow pond. You don't need to dig anything too deep or difficult. shallow water is really, really fantastic. It's a much more diverse biodiversity habitat than deep water. And what you dig your pond, you put the liner down, you wait for it to rain, and you've created this natural environment. The picture on the right-hand side is the same pond 2 years later. It took quite a while to get going because then we had that incredible drought last summer, if you remember, so it completely dried out. But that's a picture from a few months ago. You can see that aquatic plants have become established. I had a good look and it was full of water beetles. I'm no water beetle expert whatsoever, but there are quite a few different ones. Excuse me. You can also see the parish council has very sensibly allowed long grass and scrubbiness to grow up around the pond, which really massively improves its habitat value. On the left-hand side, the grass has started to droop into the pond, which creates some fantastic nurseries for tadpoles and aquatic beetles. You can see on the right-hand side, there's still quite a lot of bare pond liner showing there. That's because we dug a shallow beach area, so we had a good area of shallow water. And because the weather in Cambridgeshire can be so dry, those bits can become exposed. So in time, again, the grass will have grown over that, and that slightly unsightly pond liner won't be visible by this time next year. So you don't need much space for a pond. The one on the left-hand side here was done in a semi-formal churchyard. It's only about 1.5 meters square. And again, that took 2 or 3 hours to dig. We dig a pond down to a depth of about 40 to 50 meters, includes some nice shallow areas of about 20, not meters, sorry, centimeters, 40 or 50 centimeters, include a shallow area of between 20 and say 10 centimeters. Put in your pond liner and some underlay, which could be old towels or old carpets, and then put a few stones or something around the top to weight it down and wait for it to rain. You shouldn't add tap water, but if you have water from water butts like they did at this particular church, you can add that straight away. Tap water in Cambridgeshire is extremely nitrate rich, and if you nutrient rich, sorry, and if you add that, you may cause problems for your pond later on. You want to have rainwater if at all possible. Another small pond right hand side, again done with a gang of volunteers. That's in Cottenham, and that itself, that's only about 1 year or so after it was dug. And again, as you can see, the council has allowed scrub and grasses to grow up alongside it, and a fantastic environment it is too. When I was up there about 8 months ago, I found otter sprayed at that pond, showing that all manner of different wildlife, including otters, have managed to find it in a little corner of a patch of land in Cottenham, which is quite exciting. So you've done your little ponds, possibly. You may have some more space. You may have some resources. Once you mapped your, when you mapped your village using Natural Cambridgeshire's toolkit, you might have noticed that you had a village pond there already, but with very, very, very steep sides. A lot of village ponds appear to be dug like bowls with very steep sides, which mean that it's really difficult for wildlife such as snakes or hedgehogs, etc., to access the water. It also means that if wildlife fall in, a hedgehog, for example, it's hard for them to get out. So one thing you can do to improve the wildlife value or habitat value of existing ponds is to see if there's a possibility of reducing the angle of one of the sides. And that's exactly what we were doing here at Deuce's Pond in Over. It was a very straightforward job using a fantastic local contractor who basically took one of the sides down to an angle of about 30 degrees, making it much easier for wildlife to get in and out. It also has a health and safety benefit as well, because where you've got steep sides and no easy egress, that could be a bit of a concern. That work itself only cost about £350, so it's not a massive cost to get this sort of work done. Going forward, again, if you have the space and resources, obviously, you can think about adding new ponds. You don't necessarily have to use contractors for this. You might find you've got enthusiastic farmers who might be wildlife enthusiasts who are happy to help. Or here in Wicken, we had help free of charge from the ranger team at Kingfisher Bridge Nature Reserve, and they dug that's about 4 meters diameter pond in a patch of community woodland in Wicken. That's a nice deep pond with good shallow sides, which should hold water all summer and provide a drinking resource to a lot of wildlife. So challenges with ponds: if you do go down the line of digging something bigger with machinery, then you're into the realm of planning applications. That can get quite pricey, to be honest with you. obviously it's something which is doable. I found it quite straightforward, actually. I've been quite surprised how helpful some of the planners have been and how straightforward the applications have been. It obviously delays issues and there is some cost associated with it, but don't let that totally put you off. Another problem is the appearance of your new pond. It will look horrible for a year or so. It will look like a muddy hole. And some people won't be massively impressed with this, I'm sure. So always make sure let people know in the community what is going on in advance. Let them know it's a long-term project and that it's going to look a bit rubbish until it's full of water and nature has come along to tidy the whole thing up. As I mentioned, small shallow ponds are really, really important for wildlife, and in the Cambridgeshire climate, they're prone to drying up in drought weather. Don't top them up with tap water, which in Cambridgeshire is much, much too nutrient rich for a pond. Rainwater collected from water butts is fine. As they've done in Cottenham and Little Thetford, leave the fringing vegetation to grow. Aim for at least a 1 meter radius of rough grass and scrub around the pond. I would say, if you can do it, have as much space as you can, much bigger than that, 2 meters plus. It'll be fantastic. It'll provide shade to the water and reduce evapotranspiration. And it's a fantastic wildlife habitat in its own right for beetles, reptiles, and amphibians. Aquatic plants will arrive in time on birds' feet, etc. And once they become established, emergent and floating pond plants also create shade and reduce evaporation. You can buy these, they're not massively expensive. Make sure you use a reliable source. I've got a couple of suggestions in my resources slides, and plonk those in. And aquatic plants grow extremely quickly, so you'll be surprised how quickly they start to make the pond look much more attractive. If your pond does dry up, don't worry about it. Temporary or ephemeral ponds are massively important to wildlife, and they're the most stable pond environment because they dry out. They don't silt up as quickly as permanent ponds, and the wildlife, aquatic species, will have evolved alongside temporary ponds across the whole of the countryside before we increase drainage and agricultural intensification. So a lot of aquatic species are mobile. Water beetles can fly, for example. Even plant seeds can get around on the feet and the beaks of birds. The study has shown that where ponds dry up, even invertebrate species such as snails will survive under the wet mud until the rains come back and the pond refills. So it really isn't a problem if your pond dries out. That's something to bear in mind. Costs, those small shallow ponds, which we did, cost us between £200 to £300. It might have gone a bit now because there's been a lot of inflation over the last year or two. This includes the cost of a flexible, easy to use pond liner, also some underlay, so that stops the liner being pierced by sharp stones, etc. And a small bit of aquatic sand or gravel. That's gravel which has been washed, so you're not introducing nutrients or sediment into the pond. You can throw that in the bottom on top of your liner, and that's all you need to do. That's enough for aquatic plants to eventually become established. And then you just need to do a rain dance. And the more rain you get, the better, because then your pond will fill up that much more quickly. The reprofiling jobs I mentioned of ponds can cost between about £300 to £500, possibly a bit more now, I'd have thought, what with the cost of diesel, etc. But they're not massively expensive. So there's other ideas as well. Of course, you don't have to do wildflowers or ponds. There's all manner of fantastic things you can do in your community to massively benefit wildlife. Some fantastic ideas: plant a hedge, especially a hedge which can link up two pre-existing areas of habitat. You might have some areas of scrub or woodland, which you can put a hedge in between alongside a boundary. And that hedge, once it matures and grows, will become a wildlife corridor, allowing wildlife in those two little patches to join up and move more freely. If you've got an area of woodland, like in Cottenham, a lot of our woodland, not much in the county I know, but a lot of our woodland has gone out of management. So bringing in some simple management, such as a little bit of coppicing, a little bit often, not all at one go in the woodlands, is a good way to start bringing some light in and possibly increasing the diversity of the plants on the woodland floor. It's also massively good fun and a great way to build a gang of volunteers. Tree planting, where you can see us at the bottom planting some oak trees with Adnam's cubs. And also, don't forget orchard trees. There's nothing nicer than a lovely community orchard, and it's a resource for everybody, wildlife and people, and properly managed can be a fantastic resource for the village in the long term. There's all sorts of things you can think of doing. So some resources, I mentioned Natural Cambridgeshire's fantastic local nature recovery toolkit, and there's a link where you can look at it there. And there's some information here about some grant funds available in the area at the moment. There's a grant fund with East Cambridgeshire District Council, which you can use to create or enhance somewhere special and benefit the natural environment. That sounds fantastic. Cambridge Past, Present and Future, obviously mainly based in and around Cambridge City itself, but I think some South Cambridgeshire parishes would be eligible to join too. They have the Cambridge Nature Network, I think you could join, and that's a potential source of funding. In South Cambridgeshire, again, there's a community chest fund supporting projects to enhance the natural environment and aim for an increase in biodiversity. Likewise, in Huntingdonshire, where their community chest focuses upon improving the quality of life, which is important, and the well-being of everyone. And I think you can argue a nature-based project massively improves everybody's quality of life and well-being of the whole community. So I'm sure you could look at that. But in Fenland, the district council promotes a number of funds which are delivered by other bodies which aim to fund initiatives to improve the environment. So worth looking at as well if you're based in Fenland. More resources for the actual practicalities of getting some of these jobs done. For information on meadows, go to Plant Life. It's a fantastic charity, and just as it says on the tin, they can tell you everything you need to know about plants in the UK, establishing them, etc. And they have the most amazing advice on how to make meadows. They've really managed to cut through a lot of the waffle, frankly, which you can hear about this sort of thing, and have some really good, straightforward suggestions. And they also, very importantly, provide, again, very clear, very straightforward, very easy to understand information upon managing your wildflower meadows by mowing, which is what you can be doing, isn't it, really, if you have one established. If you want to think about doing a pond, have a look at the Freshwater Habitat Trust website, and they have a pond clinic, which will talk through everything from planning a pond, deciding where it should go, deciding upon depths, deciding upon size, depending on what liner to use, how to go about digging it, how to make sure it's level, and then how to manage it going forward. It's a fantastic resource. One thing I didn't mention, of course, is that is a lovely way to help out wildlife, and a nice straightforward way is put up bird or bat boxes. And if you're considering doing bat boxes, have a look at the Bat Conservation Trust for information how you can best help bats. And locally, we found the Cambridgeshire Bat Group to be fantastically enthusiastic and incredibly helpful. So that's an organisation you can get some wonderful advice off locally. What's that say there? Ooh, I was supposed to be wildflowers. So Wild Seed, the next one down, that's a wildflower seed and bulbs supplier based in near King's Lynn. So they will provide you with all manner of different seeds for wildflowers, including that general purpose meadow mix I mentioned, which is a fantastic way to get going. Habitat Aid is a lovely organisation who provide a part of their profits to nature conservation charities, and they are a great source of hedge plants, wildflower seeds, orchard trees, aquatic plants, you name it. If you're interested in orchards, and that's something you might consider doing, I recommend you look at this wonderful website, Orchards East Forum. That's based upon a project managing and re-establishing orchards in the east of England, which was run, I think, earlier this decade. There's all manner of advice on how to go about planning and delivering and managing orchards on that site. It's a brilliant site, really interesting. And don't forget our site, which is New Life on the Old West. And I left out the W, so that link won't work, unfortunately. I'll change that before the slides get sent out. But don't forget the New Life on the Old West site, which has loads of information for you on the project, and also advice upon how you can go about working in your own areas. Thank you very much. Oh, whoops, I pressed the wrong button. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope that was relatively interesting. And any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Thanks, Howard. I think you did cut through the waffle there and make that very easy for people to understand, and you were very enthusiastic. It makes you want to go out and start digging a pond, so that's excellent. Does anyone have any follow-up questions they want to ask at this stage of Howard? He's got amazing knowledge and experience on all of these different sites and working with communities. So does anyone have any questions? We haven't got any in the chat, but I'm sure people must have burning questions. Oh, yeah, we've got some hands up. We've got Nick, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the presentation. My question was around measuring the biodiversity increases and what advice you would give to communities regarding before and after surveys and things like that.
That's quite a good question, an important thing to do. It's also quite a tricky thing to do because what you can measure depends upon the expertise and the level of knowledge in the community. So we've been running as part of New Life in the Old West a training for what we call nature volunteers, people who will go out and monitor wildlife. And it's very hard to take something from scratch and get them up to a level where they're going to monitor the more unusual species. That's one thing to bear in mind. And what sort of enhancement will you be looking at in the village if you're looking at to monitor? So if you've got things such as wildflowers, for example, I'd point you towards the Plant Life site again, where they have some fantastic information upon monitoring wildflowers. They have 3 different levels, essentially. They have one called Every Flower Counts, which is basically counting the number of nectar sources at a certain time of year. That's a great thing to do with school kids, for example. They have another one, which is they call Rapid Grassland Assessment, which is a much more detailed assessment of your new area, using some simple quadrats and some simple negative and positive indicator species. You can assess how your wildflowers are improving that way. And they also talk you through the whole the whole sort of biodiversity monitoring systems as well, if you want to go higher again and find out what sort of grasses you've got and really have to get a full-on list of what you've got in your areas. So that's one way to go about it. I think if you were to do a pond, I'd point you towards the Field Studies Council website, and they sell a wonderful guide to aquatic species, which I've got one in here somewhere. I can't see where it is. It's called the Freshwater Trail, and it's useful for school children. It's also useful for professionals going out monitoring, because it breaks everything down into different families, different genus, etc. And you can start to get a good idea of what invertebrates you have in your pond water. Obviously, I find it a lot easier to identify aquatic plants. So that's something as well you look at as well. Again, there's loads of information on the Freshwater Habitat Trust for monitoring aquatic plants in freshwater. Basically, but this information is always there on the internet. It's something, if you've got the time, you can find and become quite skilled. But it does take time, especially if you are starting from scratch or you've got a team of volunteers who are starting from scratch.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Yeah, great. We'll go to Michelle now.
Hiya, thank you. That was really good. So I live in Hasingfield. We have a wellhouse meadow, which is 9,000 square meters in size. Ooh. And I know, we've been working with the parish council, and we've kind of altered the mowing scheme, and we're, it's sort of in a trial. But I have 2 questions. So the mowing is done by a contractor, and I don't really think we can do it as a community group because it's too big. So you said about using scythes or a bar mower. I don't.
Yes.
Why, what's the advantage?
You're spot on. You'd have a horrible hard time trying to mow a meadow that size with scythes. It's something which is coming back into practice a little bit in the country, using Austrian scythes, which are a lot more lightweight and easy to use than traditional scythes from the UK. And these are available from Emmersgate Seeds and MD actually wants one, and they're really useful around the allotment as well, but amongst other things. But with a bit of skill, a team of you can mow a meadow with scythes, but you'd be there for a long time, the size of your one. A bar mower is something called an Allen scythe, which is it's a type of mower which, instead of having a rotary blade inside the mower, it has in front of it a long bar, up to say about 1.5 meters, 2 meters long, which have little cutters on, and then you can run that through the grass. And just as with a traditional scythe, instead of mashing up the grass, it lays it down so the grasses and the flowers fall in one segment, which are really good for two reasons. It's a hell of a lot easier then to rake it up and get it off the site than if it's been mushed up. And secondly, if you've got a local riding stables or something, they may actually come along and collect it for you and dry it out as hay. Who knows? That sort of thing does go on occasionally. But yeah, as long as your contractor is cutting and taking away the cuttings, taking away the arisings to reduce the soil fertility, it doesn't really matter what they use to do it. To be honest, I think that would be absolutely fine with this, with a big rotary mower and a collector.
Yeah, they're collecting it all, piling it in the margin in a big pile.
Yeah.
And then we're coming along and raking it flat in the margins.
Oh, okay, you could do that. Yeah, the other thing you do, if you left it in a big pile somewhere in the corner of the field, somewhere under some trees, you're creating another fantastic habitat with a big pile of compost. It's a fantastic overwintering site for grass snakes. You might find grass snakes then would use for breeding as well. So you've got another plus if you leave it as a pile, and you're also taking up less space as well. What do you think about it?
Well, I don't know what to do now, because the first year we did leave it in a pile and it fermented.
Yeah.
It was turned into really smelly.
Oh dear. Okay. Right. Well, if it didn't work on your site, I'd try something different, because that's the interesting thing about this sort of work is every site is different. The local ecology differs, the local climate differs, even over a small area. So things which work well somewhere won't work well somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, so you basically made a load of silage, which not ideal on a village green.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on to Rosemary? You've got a question? I think you're going to have to unmute yourself, Rosemary.
Hello.
There you are.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, you. Hello, Howard. You were talking about sort of analysing what you've got. I'm from Soham, and the town council recently acquired a piece of land which is about 2 acres, which used to be farmed for a lot of years, but was then used for growing flowers and has now been completely abandoned for the last 5 or so years. So we're trying to turn it into a wildlife place. What we really need is somebody to come and tell us what we've got and what we need to try and keep and what we can do to encourage more and more of it.
Yes,
because we're a bit lost at the moment.
Okay, that is really important. It would be a shame to go and damage something, in a well-meaning way, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And by the sound of it, you'll have quite a lot of scrub and long grasses growing on the site already, which, even though it might look a bit of a sight to you and I, is some of the most important wildlife habitat you can have. Our countryside's incredibly tidy, and a lot of scrub has been taken away and removed. It's vital for nesting birds, it's vital for mammals, it's vital for fungi, it's vital for, you name it. It's really important to have some scrub, but you don't just have a big pile of scrub in the middle of town, so you have to look at something suitable for the site as well. Are there the first way to go about getting some help is have a think who's in the local community. Are there any people there with some knowledge who you could tap up? Is it something you could advertise at local community hubs? Say we've got this site and we're looking for help. I know the community hub in Soham is generally quite busy, so you might get some contacts that way.
Right.
I'm trying to think what else. I mean, any community group at all. So have you got an allotment group, for example? You'd be surprised sometimes how knowledgeable allotment gardeners can be about their.
They tend to be proper gardeners, though, and they don't do wildlife.
No, can't eat it, can you? So what's the point? No, okay. Well, some allotment groups, so you might have some interest. Is there a local bird watching group? Is there a local group of ornithologists? Is there a local group of trying to think, people who've been doing ecology courses in U3A, something like that? You'll be surprised sometimes to find what's available. The most important thing to do, I think, is to get the news out there that you've got this exciting idea and you need some help. And we found that, obviously it doesn't always work. We found that people are very often happy to come forward. There's loads of people who don't like to show off in Britain. They like to keep they keep their light under a bushel, don't they? So you need to give them the opportunity, and you might be surprised by what you can find in the community. But the other thing to look at is possibly the local wildlife trust. I don't know if they're so busy with their own sites, sometimes it can be difficult to get people out, but that's another option. We're not far from Kingfisher Bridge, and they've been really helpful. So I could ping them an email and see if any of the rangers might have time to come and have a look.
That would be lovely if you would. That would be fantastic.
Okay, but do look in the local community as well as the most the best thing to do.
I should say, Rosemary, I mean, we would help you at Cambridgeshire ACRE, but unfortunately, this project, because it's Heritage Lottery funding, it's only in a certain area.
Yeah.
So we can't go out of the area and help the rest of Cambridgeshire, because I think this is what we've learned we could share anywhere else, and I'd love to help everybody, but we're at the moment we're a charity, obviously. We haven't got the funds to go out of the area. We're paid to work in, unless they'll start complaining to us if we go out. So I think
thank you for the offer, but thank you.
I feel bad because we could help you, but it is the problem with the different funding sources.
If you send us your email address to the Cambridgeshire ACRE email,
I think we've probably got it actually. I think
of course you have. Sorry,
you're probably on our system.
Of course you are. Okay. If I find somebody who can help, I'll get in touch. It's probably
brilliant. Super. Thank you for that. That's great. Thank you.
Shall we move to we've got one more question, and then I think we'll carry on with the other slides. But Martin, you've had your hand up for a while.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, we can hear you.
It's about ponds. I'm part of the Aylesworth Parish Council. I'd love to have a pond. We've done a nice bit of rewilding. Have you any examples of parish councils having done this recently? Because I know my fellow councillors will immediately say, well, what if someone drowns in them?
Yes.
Responsibilities, risk assessments, all that sort of stuff will come straight at me from the parish clerk, I know.
Yeah, we do. Little Thetford Parish Council, that's one of the ones we've done. Also Cottenham Parish Council. And yes, there's always concerns, and rightly so, about the health risks of ponds, especially relating to young children. The Royal Society for Prevention of Accidents has loads of advice about risk assessing ponds. They don't say fill them all in. That's the most important thing to remember. The risk is there, but properly managed, it's a perfectly accessible risk. So the main risks of ponds are steep sides, so people fall in, can't get out. Sides which are hidden, which aren't visible. You don't see where the water begins, and if you're 2 or 3 years old, you're toddling along and you go straight in. It's also parents not knowing the pond is there. So that can be easily rectified by having a sign saying warning, pond. It can also be rectified by letting the community know this pond is going in advance, and making sure that all the ways to communicate in the community are used. That's important when you're doing anything really. And also, I think that's probably more or less what you need to do. I mean, if you've got a pond going into a wild area which isn't massively accessible by children, then you wouldn't expect to have kids there on their own anyway. So there's one at Little Thetford, for example, which is at a village nature reserve, and that's a good 10 minutes walk from a car park through some quite rough ground. So you wouldn't expect little children to be down there anyway. And when you get there, there's several signs saying, look out, there's a pond here, so that parents are aware that the water is there. There's, again, we will have your email address. I can send you some links to the Royal Society for Prevention of Accidents risk assessment advice I talked about. I've done a risk assessment for a few ponds myself, and I'm happy to share that as well. And please don't let the issues of risk assessments and potential problems with a pond put you off doing one. Done properly, they're perfectly safe and a really fantastic addition to the village, and a fantastic addition for children as well. They can, they can learn to be safe near water. They can see wildlife. They've got a new resource in their community.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Howard. We'll move on now to the next presentation, Olivia's. While you're just showing that, Olivia, I'll just point out to people there is information in the chat, particularly about funding streams. We've got Natural Cambridgeshire are going to launch a grant scheme soon, and also we've got one for Peterborough City Council, which is left off that list in the chat. What we'll do, we'll make sure those are included on the the slides as we go forward, when we send them out after this, and so you've got all those links. Okay, Olivia, over to you now.
Thank you. So my name's Olivia and I'm the Natural Heritage and Communities Officer for the NLO project. So Howard's been focusing on the habitat enhancement work, and my role is more the community engagement and recruiting volunteers side of things. So as Howard mentioned, we've been doing quite a few habitat creation and management training work parties. We found there is a great way to initially get people involved in a project, and because they're a fun social event, people out and about, getting to know one another, and they might then come on to help with other things later on. So might be people that might not have much wildlife knowledge already, and you get them out and about, and then might later find that they're engaged in other things. So we've been doing woodland management, so coppicing in woods in the area, and wildflower area work parties, and putting in hedges around ponds. So quite a few of these pictures are with sustainable Cottenham, and linking local groups is really helpful. So the local Cottenham Scouts have been working with sustainable Cottenham and us quite a bit, and we found that having a mix of different age groups and different abilities is really useful. And also sustainable Cottenham are now identifying their own projects, which is great. Moving on to, so Howard briefly mentioned in the questions that another thing we'd really like to do is getting people to record wildlife. So once you've put these habitat sites in place, monitoring them and maintaining them is really important, and to get volunteers out and about and engaged. So as part of the as part of the NLO project, we've set up a programme called Nature Volunteers. So we've been encouraging people to choose a route, and this will be on public rights of way, or if not, then getting landowners' permission, and recording the things that they see and who they're by, and then they submit those records to us and we submit them to CPERC. We found it's a bit of a challenge to get people to go out and about regularly and record wildlife. Our regular recorders tend to be those who do with a friend, so I think they enjoy the social aspect of it. And I think a big part of this is lack of confidence in ID skills. People might just feel that they don't have the knowledge to be able to go out there and record wildlife. As we have also, on the slides, done fixed point photography training. So even if you can't ID loads of things, going out, say, every couple of months and taking a photograph of the site can be really useful to show how things are changing with time. For example, the pond in Little Thetford House scrub is growing up around it, the aquatic plants are beginning to establish, and things such as that. And so to address the lack of confidence with ID skills, as part of the NLO project, we put on quite a lot of training. So we did online and in-person workshops. We've done bird ID, so summer migrant bird identification workshop, and this was initially as an online workshop, and then we got people out in the field so they could sort of tune into bird songs and warblers and different things about. Done dragonfly. We found dragonflies are really useful in dragonfly photography, and that's a way to bring people in who might not necessarily be engaged in nature already but enjoy photography, and then you're sort of joining up those interests. More specific things such as reptile and amphibian training, aquatic plant ID, otter and water vole monitoring, and also putting on events, so visiting other sites in nature reserves, so sort of showing what a wildflower area, for instance, could look like in the future. So we visited some wildlife trust sites such as Trumpeting Meadows, and showing how with like management over a few years, the wildflower area that you have in your parish council area could look. And it's been really great. So volunteers getting to know each other and that sort of thing, having regular events. We've also been doing recording days with local experts, and local experts are really helpful in sharing their knowledge and enthusiasm. So in the pictures here, we've got a few different examples of the experts we've been working with. So we recently did a bat walk in Little Thetford with the Cambridgeshire Bat group, and we organised this in conjunction with the church there. So it brought in, a lot of, I think there was about 35 people that signed up. So it was really popular. People who had never done bat recording, might not have much of an interest in wildlife. It's a really great way to bring together people of all different ages. The kids were really, really enthusiastic. And also older people, like don't walk far and have bat detectors to be able to hear the bats. And then we've done small mammal trapping with the Cambridgeshire Mammal Group. Been really, really helpful. Moth trapping with Bill Mansfield, the county moth recorder. And went to Wickham Fen and did cuckoo and reed warbler recording with Nick Davies. And I think the main thing to note is just reaching out to these people, maybe trying to find a specific person in the group to get in touch with, and just asking them if they'd be happy to maybe put on a walk for your village or do a recording session. And they're often happy to be contacted. Another way to engage people and recruiting new people to the project is by focusing on particular priority species. So the photo to the left is of a turtle dove, and these birds have been on the UK Red List since 1996, and they're a farmland bird. And the three key things they need are a water source, as they're really, really thirsty because they've migrated all the way from sub-Saharan Africa. They need hedges, and they need a food supply. So the farmers in the area will do supplementary feeding with grains and seeds. And I think focusing on priority species can just make people feel like they're doing something really worthwhile when they sort of realise how endangered a species is. Even if they're just putting in a pond, if you realise that will have such a big impact in bringing a rare species to the area, can really help to engage people in the project. So the photos to the in the middle and the right are from a turtle dove landowner training event, which we did with a local farmer who was part of the Ely Nature Friendly Farming Group and RSPB Operation Turtle Dove. And we just had a look at the site, talked about the things that turtle doves need, and also how to recognise a turtle dove. So they make a purring sort of sound, and RSPB are looking for people to submit records when they hear one to the app Bird Track. They can get a better idea of the number of birds in the area. And citizen science such as this is so important because the RSPB don't have time themselves to sort of go out and listen to birds. So the more data they have, the better. And also creating connections between so the RSPB, farmers and different groups can just be really helpful, so that when projects such as Enloe are finished, these sort of efforts can carry on into the future. Also, as part of the project, we've been organising Open for Nature Days, where we've been opening up community spaces and inviting along local wildlife and conservation groups. So in these photos, you can see people such as RSPB, Wildlife Trust, South East Cambridgeshire Badger Group and different things. And we've organised activities such as guided bumblebee walks with the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, small mammal trapping, looking at trapping moths. And yeah, again, events such as these sort of really build a sense of community, and people can build connections that carry on after the project's finished. So for instance, with the Bumblebee Conservation Trust attending our Open for Nature Day, they were then invited to attend the Ely Green Fair and put on walks for other people in the area. So yeah, I'd encourage, obviously it requires a bit of resources, but most people are happy to attend at no cost. And if you have the space and can do a simple risk assessment, then organising something like this in the summer when it's nice weather is really a good way to bring people together and share interests and knowledge. And for instance, so for the Soham wildflower patch, if you're trying to find someone that can maybe record the wildflowers that are there at an event like this, you'd probably find someone who could help with that. And then these photos are from an open day we held in August on Cottenham Village Green. And for this open day, because we found for the last one, attendance numbers weren't great. And I think that was partly because there was a beer festival going on in the neighbouring village. Also, it was sort of in an area a bit further away. So having it on the village green was great because it meant that there was more passerby and drew in other people. And we also put on additional activities such as a local textile artist called Jane Frost came along and did some willow weaving. We had a local bushcraft group come along to do paracord bracelet making. A farmer, so Fenham Farm from Cottingham, came along to sell the apple juice, and having some bits and co-op group, having some things there that maybe are less wildlife focused, I think can be good for drawing people in that maybe aren't so interested in wildlife already, and drawing other members of the community. And it's a great way to then recruit new volunteers for wildlife projects if it's fun events. And then in this photo we've got, so I think working with schools is really important to build connection with nature from a young age. Kids often show enthusiasm that their parents don't necessarily show. So as part of the project, we've been going into schools and building bug hotels, sowing wildflower seeds in yogurt pots. And these are all cheap things that can be done in the community. And children can take their wildflower seeds home and grow them and share their enthusiasm with their parents and grandparents. Although we've found it can be a challenge getting into primary schools, they're just so busy. I tend to find the summer term had the most success. But because of this, we've worked with the Peterborough Environment City Trust to create some educational resources, including lesson plans which match the curriculum, which then can be offered to school teachers to support them in teaching. And doing things like that then means that they can hear about the project even if they don't have time for you to go into a school and deliver some activities. And the photos on the left are with a homeschool group in Willingham that we've worked with, and we found they've been really engaged in all of our activities. So we went along and built some bumblebee houses, planted wildflower plugs, sowed wildflower seeds with them, and they were really, really enthusiastic about it. So if you can't always get into schools, maybe look at another way that you can engage with primary school age children. Another way in engaging people in nature and biodiversity projects and recruiting volunteers we've found is to look at the history side of things. So as part of the project, we had some evaluation consultants do a mid-project evaluation, and they noted that more people are interested in history than they are in nature. So we've put on some online talks about the history of the Fens and related blog posts. And the photos to the right show us going into community hubs with History Needs You, which are the historical consultants we've been working with. And we've been recording oral histories, so chatting to people about their memories of nature, farming and the landscape. And it's been really great to sort of engage with a harder to reach group in a way. So these people often tend to be old, so they can't always come out on wildlife walks, and a way to engage them as part of the community. We've also run a photography competition, which it was slow to get going, but then we had a lot of entries in the end, and we advertised this to primary schools through local parishes and on social media. I found it was a good way to get people to go outside and take photos. And once you've taken a photo of a species, you might then recognise that you can't ID it. So it encourages people to start thinking about what they can recognise, what they can't recognise, and then go and get some help in IDing what they can't. I think that's all. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Olivia. I think it's some really good ideas there for engagement with the community, all ages, and some of them quite simple to try in other places. And we have had, I think, good engagement through this project, haven't we? Considering we started it when we were just coming out of COVID, I think the sort of audience numbers and the community numbers are building as we've gone through. Does anyone have any questions on the community engagement side?
A comment from Nick about using apps. They can be really, really good. So I don't know if anyone's heard of the app Merlin for birdsong. That's really good to go out if you don't know, and it picks up loads of different things. And other things such as I'm a Naturalist. I go along to a local moth recording, and that IDs them. But it's good to do that alongside, I think, having your ID guides and things such as that.
Yeah, there's all these clever online things now that identify plants, aren't they? You can use on your phone, etc., which are helpful. But as you say, it's best to check it's got it right when you look at it.
There was a question in the chat.
Any other questions?
There was one earlier in the chat, Kirsten, just to say from Lois at Houghton and Whitton about, has anybody got any ideas or advice on encouraging volunteers to get involved? I don't know whether Olivia and Howard had lots
Yeah,
of...
I'm trying to look where. What does
Yeah,
it? Oh yeah, ideas to
could-
encourage volunteers. We've had some there. Do we have any of the others?
yeah, there's generic things as well. So one thing to do is to have a look which groups are already in your community who are organised groups, be it scouts or cubs or allotment groups. Who knows? And if you go to an organised group, then you find that a good proportion of those may well be interested in doing something different. You find you might have a ready-made group of volunteers. And a great example is we've been working with Cottenham Scout Group, none of whom had been involved in habitat creation at all till we started, and now they absolutely love it and they're coming up with their own ideas. So it's you're gaining volunteers and also sort of giving people new ideas themselves as well. Olivia mentioned something really, really good about the fact that there's loads of incredibly helpful specialists and enthusiasts in Cambridgeshire. We're really lucky with this. And I've been surprised how approachable people are, such as the BAT group and some of the county recorders. So, you know, if there's something you want to do based around particular species or habitats yourselves, please do approach these people. They're not standoffish, and a lot of them are really, really keen to help, and it's been really good.
I think one good thing about this project, it has pulled together so many different partners, so many different specialists, and as you say, Howard, everybody's really keen to help. So that, you know, it is about partnership working, and that's helped us deliver this how we have. Nick.
Thanks. Just on that, we, as part of our Biodiversity for All project, we've been running a Green Skills program, which we offer the chance for people who are not in employment or education currently to get a City and Guilds Trust qualification in ecology and land management, things like that. And it helps us meet our targets with our different sites because they go and actually do practical work and assessments on those sites. And it's been one of the success stories of our program. So I'd encourage you to go to your councils and say about those kind of things, because it's a great way of skilling people up in the green economy. And they've really appreciated it. And that work is with Groundworks that have been delivering it for us. So it's been one of the
where have you been delivering that?
We've run one.
Where have you been delivering that, Nick?
So the first one was at Hinchingbrook Country Park. So this is in Huntingdonshire, and we are about to start one at Regatta Meadow in St Neots next week. So I think this will be the third one, and yeah, it's been a great success story so far.
Yeah, and supporting people into work at the same time. Yeah, there's definitely some more could be done there, I think, across the whole of Cambridgeshire and down into the parishes as well. Okay, do we have any other questions either on the specifics of the practicalities of the sort of conservation works or on the community engagement side? No, it's okay. Well, what I think we've seen tonight is a lot of ideas, really, and hopefully that's what we'd like you to take away, those ideas to your own communities. Simple ideas on how you can get going on the conservation habitat changes in those community green spaces, but also ideas on how to engage with all your community to come forward to be part of those projects. So hopefully our experience we've learned through this programme, we're talking about here in the 9 parishes we've been working in, will inform other parishes. That's what we're hoping. And there will be resources that we will be writing up that will come out of this. We're not quite at that stage yet, but the learning resources and the support resources will be written up and be on the New Life on the Old Blessed website. There's also currently some of the educational resources, which I think could be used for, it's not just in schools, I think they could be used in communities and with definitely with younger people in communities, are already on the New Life on the Ebb website. So if people want to look on there, you can just download those. They're free resources. There's also some walks on there as well, and activities on there. I'm not gonna, if we haven't got any more questions, we can, I'm not going to try and drag this out for another 15 minutes, but we can finish there. Hopefully you've got a lot out of that, what we have done, and we will obviously send around the slides. We won't do that tonight, because we just need to get some of those, I think some more of these contact details and particularly the grant programs onto those slides, and then we'll send them around tomorrow morning for you. It does seem it is a really golden opportunity at the moment to do things in your community, because there's so many grant pots available that are you know, easy to apply for and worth applying for in those areas. So obviously this is a, you know, an encouragement to take things forward as parish councils and as communities. Okay, I'm going to thank you all for turning up, particularly thank our 2 presenters, Olivia and Howard, to sharing their knowledge with us tonight, because that was really excellent. And say look out for more of these. We take different topics. We tend to do an hour and a half. But yeah, look out for more of these events, these staying connected events that will come up as we go through the rest of the year. Okay, I wish you a good evening, and thank you very much.